Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our Diversity and Inclusion webinar. Before we get started, I'm just going to leave a few seconds or so for people to join. And in the meantime, I'll just quickly run through our house rules. So just to let you know that you will be muted throughout the webinar, but please do interact with our panelists by typing your questions through using the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom of your screen. Any questions you type through to us, we will pick up at the end. And any questions that don't get answered, if we do run out of time for whatever reason, we can get back to you afterwards. If you're a little bit unsure as to revealing yourself with a question, you can also ask those anonymously as well if you want to. So that option is there if you'd like to take that up. And just lastly, if you do have any issues today with technology or anything like that, please do let us know by emailing us using the email address on screen, which is support@cisec.org, and another member of our team should be able to help you with anything that's going on there. So here's our webinar today. So this is the 5th webinar of the Diversity and Inclusion series. This one will be focusing on race, ethnicity and diversity. We should have a range of different perspectives today. We've got 3 fantastic speakers here to talk to you about the topic. And we have a wonderful host as well. So before we hand over to introduce you to our speakers, I'd like to introduce you to our host. We're very lucky to have Dr. Saritha Arunkumar here hosting the session this afternoon. Saritha has a wealth of different affiliations and accolades that she holds, including 2 decades of experience in information technology. Throughout her career, Saritha has had a number of different roles, including security lead, consultant, specialist, senior architect, and is currently a security leader and master inventor. In terms of the different organisations that Saritha has worked for, this has varied from working for major banks, insurance firms, social security firms, telecoms, trading and retail as well. In addition to this, Saritha has presented at a number of different conferences, published papers, giving her a long list of different patents. Saritha's dedication to the community has seen her be awarded a PhD, as well as an MBE in operations management. In addition to this, as if that's not enough, Saritha has also been winner of Top 100 Asian Stars in UK Tech in 2018, and more recently, the winner of the 50 Most Influential Women in Cybersecurity and IBM Hero. So thank you so much, Saritha, for being here and for hosting the session. I'll hand over to you to get us started.
Thank you very much, Sophie. That was really kind of you. Lovely words there. Thank you so much to everybody who's taken the time from your busy schedules to join this session. It is a very important topic to all of us. And today you're going to be seeing different perspectives from our brilliant speakers. I would like to take the opportunity to quickly introduce you to each one of the speakers, and then they will take it away. So up first, we have Rohit Sagar, who is the digital collaboration leader at Deloitte. Rohit has been very, very instrumental in being the electronic face of Deloitte, and also for the remote working for Audit and Assurance UK, bringing a wealth of experience. You will listen to him shortly, but we also have Ovanate, who is one of our second speakers for this session here today. Ovanate is the founder of Best Man Solutions, and it's a search and selection firm that's dedicated to meeting the demand of cybersecurity skills. Ovanate advises CISOs and heads on market factors which could impact their headcount goals and designs bespoke solutions to address them. So it's absolute pleasure to have Ovanate with us as well here today. And of course, our brilliant speaker here, Bev Price, who's a security consultant with a wealth of over 2 decades of experience, primarily in the financial services. Bev is going to be also talking to us from her viewpoint about the topic today. So I'm absolutely pleased to have 3 of our speakers here today. Thank you so much to Bev, Ovanate, and Rohit for taking the time. Please feel free to share your thoughts, your, the experiences that you've had, because this topic is very important for us. And thank you to everybody for being here today with us. In terms of the Q&A, as Sophie mentioned, feel free to post your questions. We would be taking the questions at the very end, but on the Q&A chat, if the speakers feel that they would like to answer it before leaving it to the end, they will go ahead and respond to it. But otherwise, we will take some of the questions at the very end as well, just being conscious of time. So please sit back, and I would like to now hand over it to our first speaker, Rohit. Rohit Sagar, over to you.
Thank you, Sarita. Hi, everyone, and good afternoon. Just to reiterate, my name is Rohit Sagar. I have two roles at Deloitte. The first one is I head up our digital collaboration and audit. In effect, I lead the electronic face of Deloitte to our clients in terms of how we collaborate and communicate electronically, and as well as driving collaboration in the firm internally. The second role I have is more of a respect and inclusion role, where I head up our Ethnicity Council at Deloitte, a mentor to people in the firm and outside. That's a role I particularly enjoy. I am a respect and inclusion advisor in the firm and also a respect and inclusion ambassador of the firm. So today, what I really wanted to talk about was microaggressions. What are microaggressions? What is the impact? And what are organizations doing to combat this? And the reason why I bring this up is because there seems still to be some misunderstanding and blur around what is a microaggression. Now, a microaggression, it's a term that was coined by the Harvard University, is a subtle verbal or non-verbal behavior committed consciously or not that is directed at a member of a marginalized group and has a harmful derogatory effect. Now, the best way to kind of explain this is through example, and I'm going to give you quite a few examples here based on certain categories. So let's look at race to start with. I remember, not in this company, but the one before, when I was being interviewed for the job, and very soon into the interview, the HR executive said to me, she goes, well, your English is very good for an Indian. And I was quite taken aback by that, because what made you assume that just because I'm Indian, my English is not very good? But that's a typical microaggression. Let's fast forward a few months at that company. And I remember I was on a conference call with somebody from the US. And this individual could just not pronounce my name. Now, let's be straight up here. I mean, my name's not hard to pronounce, Rohit, it's 2 syllables. But I think this person just didn't want to make the effort. On that same call, and further down, I had made some miscalculations. And the person turned around and said, but I thought you Indians were supposed to be good at maths. Again, a microaggression. That's something I personally had. I'm sure others have faced this in their lives. I remember once I was in a taxi on the way to the office in Dublin, and the taxi driver looked in the rearview mirror and said, where are you from? To which I responded, I'm from London. And he squinted his eyes and said, well, where are you really from? Now, why do you want to know? And why would you not let me decide whether I'm going to bring that up or not at my discretion? Now, that's another typical microaggression. Microaggressions actually happen from quite a young age. I remember my son once came back from nursery and said, oh, Dad, one of the ladies was saying that, my hair is black and others' hair is normal. And I was like, wow, where did you hear that from? And I took quite an exception to that. I explained to my son, that's not the correct way to explain it. I talked to the management at the nursery and I said, look, you have to say, you can't be saying it in that way. Everyone's hair is normal. It's just that they're different colors. So the point I'm making, that it can happen at a young age. One microaggression that's very common, and it's not something I've experienced personally, but it's when you had people going up and touching people's hair, especially Black women's hair. With or without permission, it doesn't make a difference. You don't have the right to do that, and that is considered quite a strong microaggression. Let's move to gender, where you may have a male manager telling a woman employee, well, you should try and smile more at meetings. I mean, that's a typical microaggression. Or I remember once when I went to check up one of my audit teams, this was years ago, a large audit team with 10 guys and 2 girls. And I walked in and one of the guys said, who's getting the teas in? And guess what happened? All 10 guys looked at the 2 girls, and I was quite dumbfounded and frankly offended by that behavior. To which I said, look, no, don't worry, I'm the senior person here. I will get the teas, just to make everyone feel slightly embarrassed that kind of behavior is unacceptable. I think many of the people on this call may have faced this, where especially if you're a female and you've walked into a room full of tech guys and they've given you a look where the look is basically, what are you doing here? And that's a typical non-verbal microaggression, right? Let's move to sexual orientation. This was years ago. I remember I was at a meeting and one of my colleagues, he's gay, and in the meeting, the other party said, "Oh, you're gay." She deduced that he was gay, and she goes, "Oh, you're gay. You should meet one of my friends. He's gay too." Well, what makes you think that the LGBT community only talk to each other? I mean, that's another example. Or once I was at a lunch, I was picking up my food, and I heard one employee say to the other, "Oh, you're eating salad? Well, that's so gay." And I had to pull this employee aside and said, "Look, you really need to re-examine your values here, because that is just inappropriate, maybe very offensive to someone, and it's offensive to me, not just the LGBT community, but the population." Let's turn to disability. The number of times I've heard somebody say in uncertain words, "Oh, you've overcome your disability, and that's so inspiring." I mean, I think many people with disabilities, in fact, all people with disabilities, want to live in a world where they're not judged by such low standards, where they're congratulated for getting out of bed in the morning. I mean, you shouldn't be shocked when your coworker who may have a disability is able to accomplish just as much as their able-bodied peers. Let's look at faith. Some of you hear comments saying he's Christian or she's Muslim, but they're so open-minded. Again, a microaggression. I know on a regular basis, being from a Hindu background, people said, "Oh, Rohit, you're Hindu. Is it true that you really worship cows?" I mean, before you ask that question, I think you should do some research. It's quite easy these days to figure out before you come to me with such uninformed question. That happens in the age criteria as well, the category, where you've got junior staff maybe saying to senior staff, "Do you even know what Snapchat is?" Or what is Instagram or Facebook? Well, that's for old people anyway. So I hope that gives you a good idea, and there's quite a few examples they have given in terms of what are microaggressions. But more importantly, what is the impact? So think of it this way, and it's not hard to imagine, but if you simply consider how it would impact your life if you felt like you were subject to a constant stream of insults and slights, and always bracing for or recovering from an offense. I mean, this toll can lead to anger, depression, low work productivity, problem-solving abilities. And further research has shown that microaggressions, although they are seemingly small or sometimes innocent offenses, can take a real psychological toll on the mental health of their recipients, resulting in, as I mentioned, depression, prolonged stress, trauma, anxiety, even heart disease and type 2 diabetes. So in my book, they need to change the word to not microaggressions, but macroaggressions, because it is literally death by 1,000 paper cuts. So I've talked about examples, the impact, and now what are organizations doing to really combat microaggressions in their firm? And it's generally a two-pronged approach, one at a personal level, one at an organizational level. So really what an organization should be trying to do is creating and spreading a culture of understanding. Now, we all make mistakes. I myself have made statements which are microaggressions. And that's because we are brought up differently, different geographies, different cultures. And I know when I moved from Zambia in Africa to the UK, I was still trying to understand the culture there. So I made some mistakes, and I will continue to make mistakes. But what a company should do is have, there should be no finger pointing. It should be a culture of correcting and educating people. So if you make a mistake, pull someone to the side, explain to them why it's offensive, and educate them in that way. Really, at a personal level, what we should all be doing is simply making an effort to ask questions, but in the right way. If you can't ask in the right way, don't ask. But you need to stop and think before you speak, especially when you're weighing in on somebody's identity. And I think everyone on a regular basis should re-examine their beliefs, right? Do those beliefs that you had at a younger age still hold true now? Do they still resonate with me? And you should be doing that on a regular basis because time has changed. One of the most important things all of us should be are allies. So this is if you experience or see someone being the recipient of a microaggression, stand up for them, whether they're you're within your own organization, even in clients. I have stood up twice to some of my clients saying, look, a comment that's made, that's simply not acceptable. You need to rethink and re-examine your beliefs. So that's at a personal level. We all owe it to ourselves, and we all have a personal responsibility. Secondly, it's at the organizational level, where we have real tone from the top, where we make sure that our leaders, me being one of them, are accountable. So we talk the talk and we walk the walk. And if we don't, well, then we're taken into account. Many organizations have set up speak up lines where you can talk to an independent body in confidence. And that's really so that people don't suffer in silence, because that's going to hammer your well-being, your mental well-being. And remember, those people that are receiving those microaggressions are not the issue. It's the people that are delivering it that are. Many organizations have learning. I think making learning mandatory is a better step, although you need to communicate it in the right way so people don't feel resentful that, oh, I'm having to do this. But talk to them about the positive way of communicating, the positive way of having these learnings and making it mandatory. One really good tactic that we have used and strategy we have used at Deloitte is having regular listening sessions. And this is where we've had Zoom calls where we've had 4,000 or 5,000 people. This is a monthly basis where we have leadership involved and people talking about their personal experiences, kind of like what we're doing in a way today, where people can learn and really hear about the impact it's having on people if they're the recipient of inappropriate behavior. And the beauty of that is it generates ideas, leadership hear about it, and people get heard about what's happening. And and this is happening in many organizations, not just Deloitte. And then finally, it's setting up various control groups that challenge the organization. So we have, as I mentioned, an Ethnicity Council. We will challenge our leadership. And we also have respect and inclusion advisors. These are people that are trained up. I'm one of them in the organization, so that if a colleague, peer, whoever, staff member wants to come and talk to me about a particular scenario, they can talk to me in confidence. I will either direct them in the right direction or even fight for them if I need to, depending on the scenario that occurs. But what we're really trying to do here, and I think many organizations are doing as much as we can to try and really reduce and stop, mitigate all of these these behaviors, and certainly when it comes to microaggressions. So thank you for listening. I hope this has helped on the topic with regard to microaggressions. And I'm just looking if there's any questions in here. Well, that's a comment, and I fully agree with that. In this world of information, I think ignorance is no longer a valid excuse. I could not agree more. I'd like to hand over to Owonate. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Roy. And now the hardest part for me is to share the screen. Right. I have so many windows open. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you all for having me. So I'm going to talk about the lack of ethnic diversity, primarily within leadership teams, and the implication to the business, and also the implication to hiring. So in my first ever private sector recruitment role, it was in the summer of 2006. And I was recruiting second to third line IT support staff. And this is primarily to hedge funds and private banks. And I'll never forget, on my second day of joining, I was taking a brief from a hiring manager that was telling me who he was looking for, the skills attached to it, the technologies, even some of the personality traits. And before he dropped the phone, he said, one more thing. He said, no Tundes or Mohammeds, just John Smiths, yeah? And that's just the way it was. And my manager was there at the time, didn't bat an eyelid. She was like, all right, let's get some CVs. So I'm glad to see that things aren't as overtly provocative, shall we say, that these things don't overtly occur. But just to make sure, I'd like to cover a few reports and empirical studies just to give us an overview of the current state of play and to give us the opportunity to address ethnicity within leadership teams or lack of. Okay, now there have been a high number of reports addressing gender diversity in technology and security, less so for ethnicity within cybersecurity. Now, a number of reports touch on it while focusing on gender, but don't really delve into it in great detail. This report by the National Cyber Security Center, along with KPMG, is a little bit of an exception. the focus was on gender, but it was also on ethnic diversity as well. Now, it was released in the first quarter of 2020, and there were 1,252 respondents, both security workers and some students, but primarily security workers. And it's a very UK-centric study. It's actually a very good study, comprehensive, and it does cover elements of microaggression as well, not just the quantitative data, but it delves into qualitative aspects as well. That's the only way you're going to find the microaggression, by really questioning. These are a summary of the findings. I think the ones that stood out to me most was point number 3. Over 40% of Black cybersecurity professionals feel they have experienced discrimination in the past year, but only 74% of potential discrimination incidences, up to 74% have not been reported. Now, this is a takeaway statement from it, that the findings indicate that the cybersecurity industry has similar levels of diversity to the UK population. I've got no doubt about that whatsoever. Good, right? But what about leadership positions? Now, this is a very telling statistic directly from the Office of National Statistics, that just Black people across the UK, and they've got the lowest percentage of workers in leadership positions, sitting at just 5%. Now, why is this so important? What's the big deal about that? The reason it's a big deal is that it's difficult to make any sort of lasting and institutional change at the ground level. You have to be in a position of influence. So let's go one step further. Let's all remember that cybersecurity, information security, it enables the business. So to increase ethnic diversity numbers who have a voice in security and to change any culture, you must address board level and executive ethnic diversity numbers. And it starts at the top. So it's for this reason that we have to look away from a siloed perspective from security. And we have to take an all-encompassing view and look at wider empirical studies, moving away from security. Now, here we have the Parker report. The Parker report was commissioned by the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy in 2015, and it was led by Sir John Parker. And it was supported by E&Y and Linklaters, right, as well. It had one simple aim, and that was to, quote unquote, address the disparity of ethnic and cultural diversity of UK boards to better reflect the employee base and the communities they serve. And now this report was initially published in 2017 with that goal in mind. It's been updated and reviewed several times over. As you can see, this quote was taken in 2020 by Sir John Parker. Now, its goal, and it updated 2017, was that by the end of 2021, there'll be no member of the FTSE 100 that would lack a person of color as a director. Person of color might not be the right terminology, but hey ho, you know, it's well meant intention. So I'll just stick with that and follow that terminology. Now, at that time, 50% of FTSE 100 board were all white. That's 100% white. It's not a case of 50% didn't have any, you know, Black, all white, no Asian, nothing. Now, upon further reviewing this in 2020, they looked wider and they looked at the FTSE 250 firms as well. And a target that they have set is that by the end of 2024, no member of the FTSE 250 board would lack a person of color as a director. Now, let's look at the key findings published quite recently as well. 26% of FTSE 100 firms didn't meet the target. However, you know, you can look at the flip side and just describe it as 74% actually did meet the target. So that's something positive to take away about it. One of the alarming aspects is that a quarter of the directors a quarter of the directors from ethnic minorities just sit within 8 companies. So there's a concentration there. So no pun intended, there's no equality in the distribution. And across the FTSE 350 that they've just reviewed quite recently, there are only 15 directors of color that's actually responded to the survey. 15 directors who actually occupy a chair or CEO, and we know that that is the top of setting a culture. So one thing I'd like to look at, especially from a recruiter's perspective, is from the ground up, how do firms actually respond to this in real time? It's all very well seeing these statistics and firms saying, yes, we're going to do something about it. But, what are the firms that are doing something about it right now? Well, NatWest, as far as I'm concerned, is they are trailblazers in this. So I'm a strong believer that in order to find out where you want to get to, you need to find out where you are at. And I just call it drawing a line in the sand. And this is exactly what they've done. They've actually set themselves a very impressive goal, and that within the top 4 leadership levels, they want at least 14% in line with the current ethnic minority percentage, and UK, Black, Asian, and other ethnic minorities to hold senior level positions. And they've actually pledged this by 2025. They've also gone to the Office of National Statistics and study, and they've realized, well, look, we have a problem here. And so specifically, they are targeting Black leaders, and they want to set a goal for 3% Black leadership within the UK senior roles by 2025. And they've also released ethnic pay gap reports. Now, we've seen this when it comes to gender across industry sectors. So these guys are actually drawn a line in the sand. They said, look, we're going to be transparent. We're going to hold our hands up, and we're going to let you know what we're paying our people as well. So this is the minority. Again, no pun intended. There are a number of firms. I think there are firms like this the response falls into 3 categories. This is the exception, the gold standard. And then the majority where it's well meant, and they seem to mean well, but there's nothing tangible. There's nothing behind it. There's no statistics behind it. There's no goals. There's no smart, measurable objectives behind that. And then finally, we tend to have the companies that say the right things, but internally, and as a recruiter, I'm in the fortunate position to speak to a number of individuals, a number of professionals across a number of organizations who are quite frank as to perhaps why they're leaving their position or why they're joining a position as well. And we know which organizations, and I'm going to call that the BrewDog effect. Most of us heard what happened with BrewDog a few weeks ago. It's all very well giving it the marketing spiel, but those behind the scenes, they know that, look, it's all smoke and mirrors. Well, a large percentage of firms fall within that category, unfortunately. So why address this? What's the big deal? Is it to help the community? Is it to give back? No. Profitability, okay? The top quartile businesses of the most diverse executive teams are 36% more profitable than the bottom quartile businesses, all right? And this is according to a McKinsey result. Innovation. When employees think their organization is committed to supporting diversity, they do feel more included, and their ability to innovate increases by up to 83%. And that's a Deloitte study. And that goes back to microaggression as well. And finally, investors. Now, certain large investors are starting to act on this, such as legal and general investment managers. They are willing to vote against FTSE chairs if the boards haven't met the Parker ethnic diversity target by 2022. And from an economical perspective as well, a lack of diversity is costing the UK economy 24 billion a year in lost GDP. And this is by a government McGregor Smith review as well. So my perspective And my point is that it's difficult to make any lasting and institutional change at the ground level. You have to be in a position of influence. So it's bigger than security, it's bigger than risk, it's bigger than technology. So you have to look above this and to address the lack of ethnic diversity leaders. So we have to look from the top down. After all, culture and direction is set at the top, and it's here that we must go to implement the change that is needed. I think that's about it from me. And I hope that gives you a good summary. I'm going to stop sharing the slides. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Obanate. Let me now pass it over to Bev.
Thank you, Sarita. Excuse me. So thanks for asking me to join the webinar as a panel member. So I've been asked to discuss my personal experience, my career journey, if you like, and my background. So I'm not your typical, what you'd expect in terms of education and background type of person who would work for a City Financial. I'm not ashamed of my background, so I'll explain that to start with. I'm from a really rough council estate, actually. I hated it. I didn't skip school. I did all my classes, but left school with poor GCSEs. I have no A levels, and I did not go to university. But what I did do, as soon as I was old enough, 15 years old, I think I got a permit from the council, got my first Saturday job. Academic, that wasn't me. I did try, and then I went into full-time work. I also left home at a fairly young age, so I had all of that going on. Obviously, we have dreams about what we want to do for career. Canary Wharf and the City of London was never far, and I still remember the days when Canary Wharf was being bombed, and then they started the programme to build it from the ground up. That's when the financials moved in. The City of London was a short bus ride away. Didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was determined I was going to work in one of those places at some point. And it was difficult. So I was in retail to start with full time. So I did the usual back then, pick up the paper on the way home from work, check the ads in the papers, apply for roles, office jobs to see what happened. I happened to get a phone call from a recruiter one afternoon who asked to see me about a role for a bank I hadn't heard of. I didn't work in the industry, so I wasn't familiar with the big names. They wanted to put my CV forward. It's like, okay. I didn't realise that at the time this would be quite a positive step for me. So the interview consisted of two people, the hiring manager and their manager. I couldn't answer 3/4 of the questions. I'm honest, I'm not going to try and lie. I don't do it now, I didn't do it then, and basically left the interview feeling like a complete failure. But as it turns out, I received a very enthusiastic phone call from the recruiter saying that they'd want to offer me the job. When I asked why, it was because I was honest, and there are things that he said his team already knows, but they don't know everything, and he wants me to do the job that he interviewed me for, how it's supposed to be done, not how I think it's supposed to be done, meaning that I hadn't picked up any bad habits in that line of work, and he was happy to have me on board, and I ended up staying there for 6 years, and I enjoyed it. So coming on to the subject of diversity and race, it's funny, you have quite a lengthy career, and it's the infrequent negatives that will stay with you. So some examples I've had. A regular one, actually, this happened quite a lot. I would turn up for interviews. This predates me having a photo on my LinkedIn profile, etc. I turn up for interview, sit in reception. I would see whoever it was after letting reception know I was here for the interview. I would hear them go to the desk, and I'd hear them ask for Bev Price after having looked at me, nonplussed. She's sitting over there. And it's the complete, a lot of the time, it was how can I describe it? It was a look of shock combined with really. And then the very slow handshake, really slow, plastered grin to the face. And there was one occasion where I was contacted by phone after someone I'd worked with previously had recommended me for a role. The person didn't want to see me, just asked when I was available. Said fine, come along, because their boss had done the interview over the phone and decided, yeah, recommendation was good enough. You know what you're talking about. When can you start? Great. Again, I've been contracting for a long time. Day one, I turn up. Someone comes down to reception to bring me up to the floor. Again, you know, big price. There were about 3 or 4 of us sitting in reception. I was the only black person there. Went over. Was told by reception, oh, she's sitting over there. Went over to the 2 ladies sitting in front of me, Bev Price, and I kind of leaned around and said, nice to meet you, stood up, shook his hand, complete shock. Took me up to meet my line manager, who turned around and looked at me when he was introduced to me and said, I didn't hire her, nothing to do with her. And that was the end of that. My only concern after that introduction was, when asked, one, I need more details on my mandate so I can do what you need me to do. And 2, I need to get paid. So could you confirm who's going to be approving my timesheets? Because I didn't want to get involved in whatever was going on there. And it's a fine line between saying nothing, in which case they think you're probably timid and useless and you shouldn't be in your job and you can't speak to people, versus actually asking questions. I think delivery of the message and the language used is important, and they can be perfectly simple questions or in response to something that you've been asked to do, which equates to, especially as a woman, being moody or argumentative when actually there is no emotion in what's being said. Another extreme example is working at quite a large organisation. And my line manager and I, the team, we sat on the bank of desks, and the head of the function sat in the bank of desks in front. Some colleagues that I'd worked with previously sat at the bank of desks behind, and they heard the daily onslaught of comments aimed at me. I won't go into detail because the language was quite offensive, but it was race related. And the only thing I did say after months of this were, when asked by my line manager if I'd heard what he said and what my response was, to which I said, I'm not going to argue with you on that. I'm not responding to any of it. I'm here to do my work, and that's what I'm going to do. I was immediately ordered into a meeting room by the head of the function, who he reported to, who slammed the door and proceeded to shout at me, which people could hear, on the floor. Now, I'm not exactly a shrinking violent. I didn't cry. All I said was, you hear what he subjected to me to since he's been here. You've said nothing. I'm doing my job. So I don't know what else you want me to do, but I'm not going to get into an argument here about any of this. So what I've learned over the years is to build your network. There are far more positive and great people out there that you work alongside than not. Maintain that network, because my career, and I'm very grateful for this, and I've never taken it for granted, all of my work has been based on recommendations. I haven't searched or applied for a role in over 14 years. Some of the people I've gone to work for haven't actually met me. I've been recommended to them by somebody else. I've always kind of apologetically in interviews offered the fact that I don't have any professional qualifications, or I didn't until recently. And at this point, I'd like to make the point that I ran away from those because I had an inherent fear of failing exams. There is an individual who I won't embarrass by naming on this call, who took it upon themselves to offer me help to obtain the certification that I did obtain earlier this year. Literally called me up at the end of the working day and fired questions at me for an hour every day solidly until I was ready to take the exam. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have passed that exam at all. That said, there are people who are going to be negative about your experience for no reason whatsoever. It's not constructive criticism, and there is a difference, and you'll recognise it when you hear it. And all I can say is ignore it. I've actually grown quite a thick skin over the years as well. Yeah, and just don't let it put you off. I've sat around lunchtime sometimes, groups of people talking about their education and where they grew up, and it's like, right, yeah, it's my, they've been to grammar schools, and they've been private schools, and they went to uni and have this degree, and that's great. I have huge admiration for people who can think that way. Equally, I know people who are highly intelligent who did not go to university and don't have a degree. Got to my turn. So, Bev, what did you do? And because I have quite a dry sense of humour, often I'd say I didn't. And they're kind of looking at me like, so what do you mean? Okay, my GCSEs were really poor. My daughter thinks they were hilarious. She's 17, working towards her A level. She will be going to uni, and I'm pushing her to do that. I think it's important for the kids today. No A levels, and I didn't go to university. And I've been greeted with a stunned silence, which has made me laugh. But again, I'm not embarrassed about that. There are plenty of us out there who who tick the same boxes that I do. But ultimately, the work ethic is the same. And that also goes for being a contractor or an employee. Obviously, I've been contracting for many, many years. And that has allowed me to build the relationships that I have done and maintain them. And I do enjoy working in the cybersecurity space. And it's predominantly been in identity management. And that's where I've met actually most of my peers, as well as stakeholders. So, yeah, incredibly grateful for the opportunity being invited to the panel today. But just understand that there are options for people out there, and the biggest one I think that anyone can have today is their network. And I have met people in recent years who are not on LinkedIn, who are good at their job, and I've told them you need to go on there. You will obtain a lot of leads and a lot of contacts through LinkedIn, which is a good one. So that's it from me. That's just a summary of what I've done. So if there are any questions, I can see a question in the Q&A box.
Thank you, Bev. Yeah, we can get to that, but thank you so much for sharing the story, Bev. We do have one question for you straight up. So what advice would you give anyone who wants a job in the area of security from your experience and from, everything that you've collectively mentioned today? What would your advice be?
I would say I appreciate that the formal qualifications are very expensive and they're not accessible to everyone. I would say build on your network. There may be opportunities to get into an organisation, and maybe if you have no exposure to technology, start on their help desk or their service desk. Internally, once you're in the door, they're likely to consider you for internal promotion or move you to another team. And then from there, you learn from the people that you work with, but be prepared to put the work in, because it's not, they might make it look easy. It's hard work, but it is very, very rewarding.
And
excellent.
Sarita, I'd just like to second what Bev has said there. I'll just say this. I started from IT support. And I tell you what, it was the best job in the world, because you'd learn to deal, quick thinking, dealing with people, and facing a lot of anger, I guess, sometimes, because people, it's a thankless role, right? So I absolutely, although I had gone through the educational route, but yeah, I started at IT support, loved it, and then you work your way up. I second that.
Yeah, sorry, I'd just like to add at this point as well. I'll also add that my parents couldn't afford to send me. I couldn't go to college and I couldn't go to uni. But the point I'm making is that there are ways of navigating your way into the corporate environment. And not to give up, just keep going.
That's a great message. Never give up. Thank you for that, Bev. Ovanate, would you like to take the question that's posted here?
It's a good question, really good question. And it reads, as a recruiter, do you think your customers would respond if you operate on a no names, no gender CV basis? I think it wouldn't. I think change is definitely hard to implement in any organization. And I think it would need to come, if not from the top, then from HR in regards to a HR policy. I think you're likely to face some resistance to it initially. But here's the thing. You're only selecting them for an interview. Once you get an interview and you meet them, those same prejudices can resurface. So it's a tool and certainly not the answer. I remember a few years ago, my missus and my boy were watching a TV program. It was like a pop idol thing. It was The Voice, right? A BBC singing competition. And their whole thing was that we don't care what you look like as long as you've got the voice, right? So they don't see them singing, and if they like the voice, they press the button, then they turn the chair around, and it's a case of who makes it to the second or third round. After the second round, they already eliminated everyone that didn't look like a pop star anyway, so the whole exercise was pointless, So you can easily relate that to this this sort of initiative. It's just a case of getting into the door. So you could interview 5 individuals and you could be more likely to pick the one that looks like you, sounds like you, as opposed to having a diverse array. So it's a tool, but certainly not the answer, but it's a good tool at that.
And Ovanate, would you also, sorry, Rohit, were you going to add something
Yeah,
else?
I was just going to add, I think you'll find that some organizations now are, they're doing it in stages, right? So rather than a complete, removing or omitting any of those details where you can identify someone, they're doing bits of it. But then, and Owanate's point is a good one, right? When you have the interview, they see who you are and those behaviors can come in. So what organizations are starting to do now is they're actually having somebody else sitting in the interview as well. And that will also provide a diversity lens, put it that way, so that there is no, in effect, to try and mitigate any of those behaviors. But that's quite an undertaking, right? Because you have to look at the resources depending on who you're hiring and how many people you hire.
Absolutely. And Ovanate, would you also like to comment on this point here as to how you can tell if a firm actually takes inclusion seriously, or it's just like you said earlier in the talk?
Yeah, relating to the talk as well, look at the leadership team, and it's very easy to see who's in leadership capacity in an organization. Go to the website. All of the photos are uploaded. And luckily, we also have LinkedIn as well, where you can filter based on seniority within an organization, and 95% of profiles have pictures in CV. So the proof is in the pudding. If they're talking about diversity, well, really, what have they done? And also look at any initiatives that they put on the website. Just don't fall into the BrewDog trap as well. And you can speak to people who you may know of that work there as well.
Can I also add to that? One of the contracts I've had in the past was asked to go in, had a bad audit. We needed to define and implement the control. That's fine. My line manager said, right, what do you need? I said, I need a team. I need 4 people at least. And this is the day rate. Fine. Which was different. He was trusting me with that process. Got the CV through from the recruiter. Said to my line manager, do you want to sit in the interviews? No, you do that. No, I want you to sit on the interviews. So we've got some sort of balance here. Long story short, I shortlisted the people and the CVs, and then ultimately after the initial first stage, the phone. I said, I think these guys are good. They have to be able to engage and speak to front office staff because they're the most demanding side of the business. Not in a negative way, their job is pressurized. The first thing he said to me was, they don't have investment banking experience. And I said that neither did we until we did. So we need this skill set. I'm not a data analyst. These guys had God level skills. They were also able to relate to me in layman's terms, being a non-data person, how they would take the raw data that I needed them to look at and translate it into something that I could review and then report on. Those 4 people actually came in and went on to deliver what was asked. And as my manager said at the time, they've actually exceeded his expectations. And all I said to him was, don't discount people who have not worked in investment banking before. I understand the concern because you have to be able to hold conversations and with some quite strong characters. And I get that. But these guys were not speaking to the front office as such. It was me. I just needed the content that they were able to create. So I think skills are transferable across industries to a certain extent. That's not to say certain expertise is required for particular roles. But yeah, you can diversify your workforce if you kind of just open up a little bit more.
Absolutely. We have another question here. It says, in an attempt to maintain the status quo of a non-diverse workforce, many organizations hide behind the message, we exclusively recruit and promote employees based on capability and no other metric. How can we encourage diversity in this kind of environment? Bev, do you want to take this? And then we can ask comments from Ovanate and Rohit as well.
Yeah, I can actually, and this again, the language is not meant to be adverse. I can challenge that because I've worked with people who apparently we've been brought in based on our competencies, and that has not actually turned out to be the case. I can say that now because for years, as some of us probably have done, you think you suffer with imposter syndrome. People are telling you you're good at your job. You know you can do your job, and you're thinking, should I really be here? Do I have a right to be here? But that's, I think I agree with the person who's put that in. It's incredibly lazy as an approach, and it shows that they're closed-minded. You then have to ask yourself, is it because they don't know how to approach this subject and are actively trying to do that, or are they closed-minded as an organisation? And do you really want to work there? It's not the answer to up sticks and leave just because you don't like something, but there are other factors to consider. And for me, those would be the main two. And that is exactly what my daughter is raising certain things with me now about her future career, which thankfully is not what I'm doing at the moment, all the hours that I put in. But yeah, that is, I'm not convinced by that statement either. And that isn't somewhere I'd want to be.
Okay, Rohit, would you like to comment?
Yeah, sure. I think, it's a tricky one here, right? Because, that's such a generic comment, and you hear many companies saying that. And, I take on what Owanate said, right? It's the proof is in the pudding, right? You have to look at the leadership. You have to look at, we have to look at the seniority within the firm. So it's not just leadership, but there are reporting levels at every stage of your, the grades you have within an organization, certainly in a large organization. I think, one of the things that I know we do in Deloitte is we have, when people go on engagements, if they're in audit or something, we have pre-engagement interviews. So we'll talk to the people, because, we spend all this time trying to get to know our client because we want to do the best work for our client, but we also need to understand your team. So we spend a lot of time doing that. And that's helped to ensure that we have the right people, and so that's internally in the firm where they're saying, we just recruit on meritocracy, on your capability and no other metric. Well, you have to look at, that's quite siloed. You need to look at the overall package somebody is bringing to a particular, team.
Sure. Owanate, do you have any additional points to add?
This is a really good question as well. And I'm focusing on how can we encourage diversity in this kind of environment. I mean, if it's born out of, if such a statement, in order to hide a lack of willingness to be diverse, is born out of our, I want to say, inability to, there's ways to find out how to do this, So is it, if there's a nefarious nature behind this to say, look, we don't care about it, I'd walk from that organization. And I don't think you should even try and change the culture. The culture is the hardest thing to change in an organization. I wouldn't encourage anyone to give themselves a heart attack in order to change your organization's culture, especially if you're not sitting at the board. So quite frankly, if someone's uncomfortable with that and they are in that kind of environment, I'd wholeheartedly find another position, because it's left for them to change it internally. If they're more willing to it and it's just the case that they don't know how to go about it, there are methods, there are tools, there are aids, there are companies out there that can help them with it. And if they're open, they're willing enough, if they're willing to take that advice, then it is all there for the taking, all free as well.
Thanks, Owanate. Hopefully that's answered the question. Rohit, I want to come back to you for a quick second about microaggression. Do you think media has contributed to the promotion of microaggressions, Rohit?
I think media has a very big part to play in that, and if you look at some of the programs that are aired, even for our younger people, the amount of stereotypes that have been portrayed in some of those programs do program young kids, and adults watch those programs as well, and that's something we need to be very careful of. I mean, I'll give you a recent example. I mean, if we think about, unfortunately, in the times we live with COVID, it was only until recently you saw the media change the narrative to calling it the Delta variant. Before they were calling it the Indian variant. Now, that's not helpful in any form or fashion. All that's going to cause is people to have hate towards Indians, right? Because unfortunately, there are people in the world that will not understand or educate themselves and trying to figure out it's just another variant. right? You have people saying, oh, it's come from India, and now I'm in lockdown for another 4 weeks, or restrictions for another 4 weeks because of people from India, or even people saying, oh, only Indians have this variant, right? So, I think things like that do not help. And I'm hoping that the media really do take time to think about what they're doing to not intentionally or unintentionally promote these microaggressions.
Thank you, Rohit. I know we are getting close to the top of the hour. Are there any last comments or thoughts that you want to leave the attendees with? Just quick round, Bev.
No questions for me.
Okay, perfect. Venati, is there anything you want to say to the attendees? Any last messages before we wrap this up?
Nothing about football. And, no, I hope you enjoyed the talk. And the only thing I'd like to say is that I think these kind of conversations, these kind of discussion points, it's a journey rather than a destination. And, you don't need to be perfect in this overnight. Just, be a little bit more conscious and increase 1% a day or something.
Yes, sorry, Sarita. It was actually something I wanted to say, that don't be afraid of having conversations with your colleagues about this subject. You can have the conversations. We know when people are being offensive and when they're not. Just be comfortable and just ask away. Obviously, depending on the relationship you have with the person, don't worry about it.
Rohit?
Yeah, I mean, mine is very simple. Be proud of who you are. Just be proud of who you are.
Excellent. I think we can leave it at that. Thank you so much to Bev, Venati, and Rohit for taking the time to share your experiences, give some thoughts into the whole discussion around race, ethnicity, diversity, microaggression. I hope this has been a useful session to people who've attended this live and also to people who are going to be listening back to this. Thank you once again to everybody. I found it really useful. It was nice listening to each one of you, Bev, to your experiences, Ovanate, some of the statistics that you brought up, and Rohit, as usual, it's always a pleasure listening to you, the things that you bring out, working with people and technologies together. So thank you very much once again to all the three of you. I'd like to hand it back just to do a quick update on the next event, if that's okay, before we wrap up. So thank you once again to all three of you, and I'll hand it over.
And could I just say thank you, Sarita, for being such an excellent host.
My pleasure.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Sarita, and thank you, Ovanati, Bev, Rohit. That was really fascinating. And we, as Sarita already said, we really appreciate you sharing your experiences with us. Some really important messages there, and things for people to take away and have a good think about. So, yeah, we are at the top of the hour. So. As we said, there's been a really fascinating discussion. We just want to update you on what's coming next. So we have another webinar in the series on Tuesday, 27th July, and this topic will be about imposter syndrome. So if you'd like to join us for that, you can go to the CISEC website under the events tab, and you'll see that there, and you can sign up. You can also go to our LinkedIn page, the company page, and you can find this event under the events tab there as well. So we hope to see you on this next event. And this event, plus all the previous diversity and inclusion webinars, are also available on the website for members to watch back. And we'll be sharing this recording as well. So thank you again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.